see. Okay, today is February 28th, 2015. It's 2 p.m. Pacific time. This is Aaron Murakami, and on the line I have Eric Dollard and John Polakowski. I am recording this call, and so if you know anybody who wanted to be on but couldn't, this will be posted on YouTube here shortly. And so if you're just logging on, go ahead and hit $4 sign, and that will mute your own phone. And then what we're going to do is just go over a couple updates, and then we'll open up for live questions. And if you have any questions for Eric or John, when we do open up for questions, just hit $5 sign, and that will give me a little flag on my screen so that I know that you want to ask a question, and I'll unmute you, and I'll just read off like the last 4 digits of your phone number so you know you're the one being unmuted for the to ask your questions. So right now, John Polakowski is actually down at the lab with Eric, and they've been working on some experiments. And John, do you want to kind of explain kind of the purpose of your trip and what you've been working on since you've been down there for the last week?
Yeah. So what I've been doing is I built this analog transmission network that Eric designed that is supposed to validate his model of creating a Tesla coil in a lumped element instead of distributed network, and that's what we've built. And it took 3-4 days to actually build it, but we started doing tests on it today. So it's looking good so far.
Now, is that similar to like what Eric demonstrated in some of the old Borderlands videos, where there's a bunch of, I think maybe like resistors and capacitors in this little network, and it kind of went cold to hot or hot to cold or something? It was kind of like counterintuitive to what most people would think was going on?
I think you'd have to ask Eric about that because I'm not too sure.
Yeah, it's the same, pretty much the same thing. So what we're doing right now is we're attempting with the limited materials on hand that aren't the right value to get a close enough impedance match for the loading networks that are going to go up on the telluric antenna. So we're starting with its component waves, and then determine what their frequencies and impedances are going to be, and then composite them into the final network, which I don't think there'll be enough time this time around for John to do that. Plus, I have to run off. I have this complication with my eyes that's kind of putting me out of business. So anyway, we're trying to get done what we can here inside the walk-in refrigerator. It's about 48 in here right now.
Right. So that analog network you're building is directly related to the seismic project. Is it like a small-scale model, and when with the actual telephone lines up, you're basically going to do the same thing but on a large scale? Is that kind of the idea?
Well, the thing is the network counteracts the telephone line, so even by itself on the bench, it'll do the same thing as it will when it's distributed out on the poles. So this is like the final network. We have to come up with some kind of final design, and then by the end of the year, hopefully we'll have all those networks attached. We're still missing an awful lot of stuff. So anyway, we're going to see the coils I have. Basically, it's the same thing as landers, but I do not have the same coils. I got coils that I got from somewhere else, so it's going to throw the impedance off. The problem here, unlike landers, is I cannot get a conductive ground, so it's going to be all these complications and boring holes into the earth and picking up capacitively, and that's going to require higher impedance. So this is not something that I can just go to the radio engineering manual and get the answers for it. So that's why there's a lot of experimenting going on right now.
Okay. And John, you're there for maybe just a couple more days? You might be taking off.
Yeah, I'm going to be here till Monday. So I'm going to be leaving on Monday.
Now, what's the, like what kind of progress have you been? I know a lot of people are wondering about the cosmic induction generator project, and since the conference last year when you demonstrated it at the low power level, where you were able to get, some of the electrical flames off the rings, What have you been doing with that project in the last, 8 months or so?
Yeah, so at the last conference, one of the things we discovered is that there's a huge impedance mismatch between the transmitter and the parallel resonant circuit of the primary. And so after that, what needs to be done is a impedance matching network needed to be created to make sure more of the power got into the coils. And so basically, I spent the past few months designing that network and then kind of refining it, and now I'm ready to build it.
Okay. Now the 2015 Energy Conference is coming up in the middle of July. Do you know if, you're going to be presenting on something different, than the
Right.
cosmic induction generator this year, but do you know if you might be bringing up the cosmic induction generator to do a demo at the higher power?
Well, I'm certainly going to try to. I don't think we would have it at the 1 kilowatt level, but maybe the 500 watt level. I foresee it being possible to happen. There's always all kinds of unpredictable things that can happen, but for the time being, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't happen.
But even 500 watts is quite a bit more than what it was. What was the original power level you were working at?
Well, I think at the conference this past summer, it was at 100 watts, but we ended up having a burn down and a couple equipment problems. Part of it due to that impedance mismatch. We burned up the coax that was leading into the primary network. So, so this would be quite a bit more. Right.
So for this, at the conference this year, that'd be awesome to be able to bring that up and do a demo at the 500 watt level. But what is the title of your talk going to be this year at the conference?
Well, it's going to be about the mag-amp and synthesizing energy via Eric's theory of parameter variation. And so the embodiment of it will be varying inductance, but the talk will cover the theory of parameter variation in general. Mm-hmm. So it'll be about synthesizing energy via changing the inductance.
Now is that, and when you talk about energy synthesis, I know this is a term Eric has used for a long time, synthesizing energy and desynthesizing energy, and it looks like there was something like that going on with the cosmic induction generator when you and Eric were doing measurements showing that you had a certain output from the radio transmitter, and then it seemed to be just disappearing right in the middle of nowhere, right between the coils.
It seemed that way, that some of the RF was just not accountable for. We didn't, we certainly didn't have detailed measuring equipment available, but it seemed that there was something anomalous going on.
Right, and those charts and graphs of those tests you have, I think it's posted on Eric's Facebook page, but it's also on your blog site, isn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested in some of that work John's been doing with the cosmic induction generator and some of the tests that he did with Eric, showing that it looks like energy is literally just disappearing right in between the coils and can't account for it, those graphs are on John's website as well. And John's website address is johnpolakowskiscience.com. And so on the mag-amp, when you're talking about a magnetic amplifier designed by Eric, and talking about synthesizing energy, is that what some people would basically say is, so-called free energy, or more energy is appearing than what you can account for that you're putting into it?
Yeah, basically. It certainly takes energy putting into the magnetic amplifier to see some energy gained. And we haven't quantified yet how much is out versus in, but we have seen some energy created in a strange fashion.
Yeah, and you've been working on this for a couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah, I sat down. I was working on the MagAmp a couple of years ago, and then I kind of put it to the side to work on the cosmic induction generator. But now I'm kind of revisiting it for this talk.
And is any of your work on that, was some of it posted in energetic form?
I did not post it. I was planning on writing a book about it, but I should have some. I'm certainly going to be posting the results from our experiments here on the forum.
Right. Yes, if you're listening on energeticforum.com, there's a forum inside of the Renewable Energy Forum, which is Eric Dollard's forum, and inside there's an Eric Dollard thread, and there's actually two old ones are closed down just to kind of preserve the information so nothing happens to it, and then there's a more recent one that's been going on for a while, and it has a lot of diagrams, and people are posting replications that they've built based on some of Eric's designs. And I think recently, I don't know if it was maybe David Dawson or somebody, might have posted some papers on the magnetic amplifier. Do you know where did he get those from you, or?
Oh, yeah. He got them from me a long time ago. Eric came up with magnetics for me on the output circuit of the magnetic amplifier. And I just never got around to posting them, but that is one of the circuits that I experimented with.
Right. So are you going to be besides giving a talk at the conference on this magnetic amplifier based on Eric's designs? Are you going to be able to have a demo there, kind of like you did last year?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or the edition of that too.
Yeah, no promises on energy synthesis or more out than in, but we should be able to show some cool stuff.
And is that going to be something high that's going to need a lot of power, like the cosmic induction generator, or is that something you can just plug into the wall?
No, it's
pretty low power. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't take very much.
Right. And so, are there any updates or anything else that you want to tell everybody about, or?
Well, yeah, I'm going to be putting a bunch of updates on my website, particularly when I get back from my week here. And I guess that's about it.
Okay. Hey, Eric, is there anything that you want to add about the magnetic amplifier stuff that John's working on and what he wants to share at the conference?
Yeah, well, that's something we worked on years ago, and then I got rather disgruntled because none of the material appeared on the energetic forum, and then basically lost interest in all of it and got into other things. So at any rate, it was the outgrowth of a mathematical paper that I wrote at the same time on the production of electromotive force and the law of electromagnetic induction. And there's a third type of electromotive force production that's not considered, and it is by what's called parameter variation. And presently, I'm really twisting my brain trying to come up with the next chapter on my book on my last presentation. These things take quite a bit of time to get together, and this is going to be a big one, and found a paper by Steinmetz that basically says that there is no definite relation between the energies in these type of systems. It's all based on the assumption of the conservation of energy, but mathematically it's never been proven that there is the law of conservation of energy applied to parametric variation type of electromotive force generation. So the whole idea is to come up with a system that does it with a static means without rotating equipment, and that's what the magnetic amplifier does. So a parametric EMF was generated, but in order to calculate the powers and energies going in and out, it takes a lot more meters and things that we have, and the complication that I'm facing is there seems to be this notion running around that I have a laboratory. I do not have a laboratory. I have an icebox filled with junk. And if we're lucky, we can find the right pieces to put something together. But at any rate, I have to, out of my Social Security, feed people and pay for their gas here and pay for their gas back and pay their rent when they're gone from where they live. And it's just simply too difficult for me to handle that. The donations that come in to EPD Laboratories is pretty much consumed in rent and insurance, and there's no way to actually make any progress on the building whatsoever with that amount of funding. And then the donations that I personally receive in the mail all go into the aforementioned expenses of paying John and Justin to work and all that. And a lot of that got eaten up when I went blind, and then there was a month I was out of business, and all the food and gas and everything that was involved in moving me around and all of that burned up another $1,000. So basically, it's not really working out so good.
Are we allowed to mention anything about the building situation, which is kind of some pretty good news, I think?
Well, yeah, we got the building. We have the original owner paid off, which is a step forward. But unfortunately, the insurance and lawyers and other parasitic entities that suck your blood pretty much wiped out our bank account. And now there's not really a lot we can do. The money that was donated for the long lines and the telluric project has been pretty much spent up. We have everything we need for the overhead construction for the most part. What we needed to get that there was no more money for, again, I paid for out of the Social Security. So there's $600 that had to be spent in wire grip hardware to hold the lines up and all that. So that pretty much wiped out 1 month's check. So the whole situation's a struggle, and then, the process of me going blind and trying to fight that end of it has left me pretty well demoralized.
Now, I do want to mention something about the building. As usual, there's the normal misinformation out there being spread around. And as far as the building is concerned, with the person who was purchasing it from the original owners, EPD Labs has never defaulted on one single rent payment. Utilities have always been covered, insurance and everything else. And basically most of the money from the book sales, like books and videos, like if you go to ericpdollard.com, that's P for Paul, Eric's middle initial, ericpdollard.com, there's a books and videos link. And if you purchase any of the books and videos in there, the proceeds from that is what has been paying the lab's rent for over the last year. I mean, probably a year and a half maybe. And since Eric went to the first conference in 2013 up here. And since then, there was one donor, and with the money coming in from the book sales, EPD Labs has officially made a purchase. It's already been through the title company and everything. A big chunk was already paid off, so the original owner is out of the picture. And the other owner, who was basically involved with EPD Labs at one point, has received every single payment due to him on time. And he is now the seller of the building to EPD Labs. And I don't want to say what the remaining balance is, but it's a fraction of what it used to be. And so just so everybody knows, that a lot of the money that has come in has actually went to purchasing the building. And that building can probably be paid off maybe in the next 18 months or a little bit quicker, if we do another like Indiegogo campaign or something like that, to basically just pay that off, because that'll free up, probably close to about $1,000 a month that can be going to parts and some of these other projects. Now on the
the biggest obstacle we're facing here right now is the money to make this into a real workable facility. That's just the hardcore reality of the situation with the cost of everything this day and age. That includes, the purchase of the building, how would you say, the paychecks for the people, the two people that will be involved to help me, that have been working with me on this and covering all their, the legal requirements of this and that and the taxes and the whole thing. And unfortunately, in a lot of places, we don't have poles up yet. There's still 20 that need to go up to carry the signals into the town. The present cost of utility pole erection with the cost of the poles, the cross arms, and the labor and everything is $2,000 per pole. And if we're looking at 30 poles, that's a good-sized chunk of money. The power company, this NV Energy, is a horrid organization that has one of the most unsafe, unreliable electrical systems probably in the entire planet, other than maybe someplace like in the Philippines or Bangkok or something, but and they just have to fight them in PUC. They will not offer 220 three-phase power anymore, and they want $35,000 to put the connection in when we should already have it to begin with. It's going to cost another $35,000 in conduit and circuit breaker boxes and transformers and all this stuff, and the whole thing just makes my head swim. When I was 19 years old and I could get all this stuff for free for RCA, it was one thing. I built all this stuff. I built a number of giant facilities, which, should be available to me now that I'm old and tired to enjoy. They've all been destroyed, and I'm not going to live another 30 years to put it back together unless I can find money and people to help me do it. That's the reality of the situation.
Now, if you're listening and if you're not sure what the seismic stuff is about, there was a facility known as Landers, which was a huge, big piece of land that had a whole bunch of antennas on there, which Eric had a fully developed advanced seismic warning system that could show when earthquakes like 6.0 and above were going to hit, 2 to 3 days ahead of time.
Yeah, about 2 days ahead of time. In fact, the Japan one came in, even though that was longer than the distance that the station was conceived to receive. It did come in on the overground through the ionosphere almost exactly 48 hours before the main event and 1 hour before the foreshock earthquake. It sent the ionospheric electrostatic measurement chart off the scale, and it remained there until the time of the earthquake, and then it dissipated. But when the Landers facility got looted, all that stuff just vanished to the wind, so I have no proof of any of it, and my notebooks were stolen. This is why I have such a nasty personality.
Well, on ericpdollard.com, there's a section on there called the Long Lines Project and a few other sections where you can actually see a lot of the telephone poles that are in the ground near Eric's lab right now. And I think there's a few pictures of Justin's truck showing, thousands of feet of telephone wire and other stuff, and there's insulators and a whole bunch of stuff. They've been taken out of the desert on old abandoned lines and stuff, and all that stuff is going to be going up on these poles. And if you want to see an actual walkthrough of Landers in operation, if you go to Eric's website and click on the books and videos page, because if you get his books and videos through there, Eric and EPD Labs receives 70% of the purchase of any of those books and videos. So they get, and that's what helps to pay the rent. But on the video, which is called Extraluminal Transmission Systems of Tesla and Alexanderson, on that page there's an extra video you can get, which is a basically like a 4-hour walkthrough on Landers, where you can actually see the whole facility working. And one question that I see come up quite a bit, like for example on your Facebook page, is people are always asking, well, why just this earthquake stuff? And the answer is, with this type of antenna line, earthquakes is just one application, but there's actually a whole bunch of different types of experiments related to all this Tesla transmission type stuff that you can do on these same lines. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's originally this is conceived as a Navy submarine communication system, and all this material was never intended to be released. And I was going to go strictly through the government grant procedure and all that when the Landers facility was intact and progress was going on that, but then a bunch of real estate scams and this so-called group that always gets in and makes sure that I lose my place to operate. The place was put up for $250,000 ransom, and the cops threw me out of my own place, and ransom wasn't paid, and the place was looted. So then later, with this EPD Laboratories, as a lot of people probably know, my organization was hijacked by some Islamic or whatever. That's a whole subject in itself, and then all the security of the situation was compromised so that the naval applications were obviated, and that basically cut the Navy out of the whole thing right then and there. They were the big losers out of the situation, and I'm just stuck with the earthquake end of it. And so the material that I had chosen not to disseminate, like the video of Landers and equations and things in my presentations, I decided to put it out anyway because it doesn't matter at this point.
Now, years ago in Bolinas, California, there was the RCA station there, and that was basically a fully functional Alexanderson network, which actually was used by the Navy for ship-to-ship communication.
It was actually one of the first ones. So the two original Alexanderson units that operate in the so-called scalar mode, where there's no propagation, it's instantaneous. Okay, I got a bad line echo there. So Bolinas was actually the first full embodiment of the Alexanderson patent superimposed on the original Marconi system, and then in parallel, the same thing was happening in New Brunswick, New Jersey. When I got there in 1966, most of that was all gone. But the people that worked on it were still alive, and they had taught me what they knew about it, but it appears that the information was modified and things were left out, so that I was operating under a delusion for many, many years of how that particular transmission structure operated, that it is not really an antenna, it does not radiate electromagnetic waves, it's a transmission structure for communicating into and out of the physical mass of the Earth. So what happened was, as the situation started to get really bad there with Commonweal smashing the equipment and vandalizing antenna structures, and my installation in Bolinas was bulldozed by the SWAT team under the insistence of Commonweal and their people, is basically I forced the Park Service to allow me entry into the facility to do an archaeological study of it. So it was kind of a risky situation the way I assaulted them. I expected to go to jail, but I had them in such a bind that they agreed to do this, and they hired a local historian, Dewey Livingston, to help me. This is all the stuff that's out now published in what I call the RCA book. And in doing this study, everything was favorable. Some idiot, Commonweal idiot, has started a major wildland fire there, and it burned all the brush in the antenna field, which worked very well for me because then I could see where the guy anchors and various coil platforms and everything were positioned. And there were massive rainstorms that year from some kind of related voodoo event so that I could dig down in the ground. And so what I did is I completely built up an archaeological representation of the antenna by the positions and the geometries of all the original stuff, and did the calculations, and then found out that this was something more fantastic than I'd ever realized. And then I built my advancement on that concept at Landers, which took it one step beyond Alexanderson.
In layman's terms, what would the improvement on Alexanderson's system be?
So the problem with both the Tesla and Alexanderson systems is they only operate on one frequency, and they're highly resonant, and they tend to store a lot of energy at that resonant frequency. So they're sluggish to respond. You can't modulate them, or you cannot use them to receive a full audio spectrum. But 30 years of mathematical work on my part, and then rediscovering the Alexanderson principle, and then some laboratory and experimental work, I came up with a way to do this, both the Tesla and the Alexanderson method of transmission, with these analog networks that covers the full audio spectrum. So that way you can hear the full spectrum of the electrical signals that are originating from within the physical mass of the Earth without any distortion. And that's basically patentable. No one else has done that before. So that's presently what John and I right now are trying, step by step to get these networks together with what we have. But there's so many coils and so many capacitors, the whole thing just wants to turn into a big jumbled mass of wires and what have you. So we have to mount all these things with terminal strips. And, well, John's mostly been doing that. Right now, I'm struggling with trying to get the next chapter together in my book on things that no one has ever been able to provide the answers to, yet I can't write a book on transmission engineering that nobody understands, so I have to come up with answers to why these forces exist and why inductance and capacitance and all that type of stuff. So the previous chapter has gone out on the energetic forum and ultimately probably properly should be placed on my website for people that are interested in the theory end of it. It took me quite a long time to get all that together, and it was I was rather elated at the results and the theoretical insight that I got from it. So now I'm attempting to apply that to the actual physical forces that are exerted on the conductor and how the ether exerts those forces, even though we know absolutely nothing about the ether. So I'm trying to come up with some kind of concept that's workable and is not too far from reality. It's really twisting my brain inside out. So right now I'm kind of in a weirded state by all of it. I'm just exasperated because it's like, trying to drive through mud and you're just not getting anywhere. It's slow progress. So I did find, John found the Steinmetz paper on the subject, and once you find a paper by Steinmetz on the subject, everything becomes crystal clear. So at any rate, I think right now, and that's what I was working on just before the telephone thing, is I'm actually able now to start writing the chapter.
Right. Now, the book that you refer to as the RCA book, if anybody wants to get a copy of that, you can go to ericpdollard.com, and in the book section there, it's called Wireless Giant of the Pacific, and that's actually the name of that station in Bolinas was known as the Wireless Giant of the Pacific, and the concept is this extraluminal transmission, which basically means there is no speed or velocity to the transmission from one point to another. It's like instantaneous at the other end, which kind of goes against a lot of this Einsteinian stuff. But the Dewey Livingston, the historian from the Park Services, his book is included in that. That's known, and he titled that Wireless Giant of the Pacific. And then Eric's book that he calls the RCA book, that's also called The Wireless Giant of the Pacific, but it's a different book from Dewey Livingston's. And that one goes into a lot of newspaper articles. It shows a lot of the stuff that happened at that facility, a lot of diagrams and equations. And the network that you're working on with John right now, aren't some of those diagrams actually in that book?
Not exactly. No, I had not developed the network at that time. So far, that network hasn't really been fully displayed publicly.
Okay.
I did get into it very briefly in my last presentation, but only just to show a variety of forms of networks. That was one network that was included.
Mm-hmm. So from here, like if you're working on the other chapter of the book, there's kind of another direction that you're taking for the 2015 conference coming up in the middle of July. And do you want to go into a little bit about what you're going to be talking on there? And there's a composer in Seattle who's kind of helping you out on some of this music stuff.
Yeah, well, this one's going to be even more difficult. So right now I'm at that initial position on it where I'm completely overwhelmed and don't know which way to go. But after spending a couple of weeks in Lone Pine and thinking about the subject, and there's a guy there that is helping me with this project. In fact, he's the one that started it off. In fact, he started off all of it. Him and a couple other people there initiated the Lone Pines writing and a bunch of other stuff. So he's continuing to work with me on the power of music subject.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is providing anything, from an engineering or a quantitative standpoint of how ancient people could lift giant stones with sounds. Well, I'm at a complete loss right now on how to explain that, but at any rate, what I have to do is will be based on a book called Music of the Spheres by a person named Jamie James. So if anyone wants to get a warm-up on this subject, I would recommend reading that book, and then that book resulted in me writing 2 papers. One was called Versor Algebra, I believe it was from Steinmetz to Pythagoras, Backwards in Time. And then there's a companion to that called the Camp David antenna. And that both of those deal with the Versor concept as related to sacred geometries and music and an actual antenna that you can build that works, a type of Alexanderson antenna that's wideband that can be used for ham radio or HF communications in general. But it never was actually tested in a shipboard environment or whatever, but at our experimental facility, which we call Camp David in Bolinas, we did build a working model, and we were successful in communicating between a Tesla transformer from there and a Tesla transformer in Los Angeles. Between San Francisco and Los Angeles is a rather sizable distance, and the signals were remarkably strong, so that was a good step forward. But again, when things got finalized and we were finally at the point which we had a working facility, it was destroyed.
And those 2 papers that you mentioned about Pythagoras and Steinmetz and his Camp David antenna, these are in the Lone Pine writings, either in the first or second book?
I don't know. They might be, but I'm not certain. I'd have to. They conceivably be, but I'm not certain.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, you can go to ericpdollard.com, and again in the book section, there's a link to Lone Pine writings. And I'd encourage you to use the links on Eric's website to go there, so that UPD Labs and Eric receive the proceeds from those sales. And you can look at the homepage for that Lone Pine writings, and you can look at the description of what's included in the first book and the second book. And actually, those papers were posted for free in Energetic Forum. Might take you a little while to kind of scan through there and find it. If you want to support Eric's work, you can get a copy where it's all compiled right there in the Lone Pine writings. And so, are there any kind of other updates or anything you want to share with anybody that's been going on recently, or do you want to get to some questions pretty soon? Or?
Well, I think that kind of covers it. So, as far as the outside plant project goes, I mean, we're looking pretty good. I expect, as long as if I need an eye surgery in my other eye, that will basically, I will no longer be able to operate, because I'm still partially blind in the one that got repaired. And then if both of them are out, that'll pretty much put a stop to everything. So I don't know exactly what's going on. I'll find out next week. It creates a very difficult situation for me, because I live in my car, and of course if I can't drive, I got nowhere to live. What I faced last time is there's nowhere for me to recuperate from these things. So again, I fall victim to having to deal with people I've dealt with in the past, which are infiltrated by various negative elements. And in this case, when I was recuperating, the place is infiltrated by Russians, and they damaged my car as retribution for me staying at this guy's place. And I'm really starting to get sick of all this stuff, as people that are listening might be gathering that I'm kind of getting fed up.
Yeah. So if y'all haven't heard the news, Eric did recently have surgery for a detached retina, and so that's kind of what he's referring to. And I do want to mention on John Polakowski Science.com and also ericpdollard.com, If you want to support their work, you can also donate directly through PayPal, and that'll help them out. There's also addresses in case you want to, if you're able to mail a money order or check or anything. Definitely purchasing any of the books and videos through their websites also helps them. And they're both going to be doing presentations at the 2015 Energy Science and Technology Conference. And if you want info on that, it's on EnergyScienceConference.com. It'll be July 10, 11, and 12, which is a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the middle of July in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is about maybe 45 minutes east of Spokane, Washington. So it's right by the Washington-Idaho border. Let's see. Yeah, John, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I need to update the mailing address on my website. The current mailing address on it is not correct. I've since moved.
Okay.
So,
but your PayPal still works?
My PayPal still works, yeah, and any donations are very happily received. I struggle to make it up for the lab every time. But it's definitely great to be out here and be making progress.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and open up for questions. And if you do have a question, you can hit $5 sign, and that'll flash a little question mark up next to you, so I know that you have a question. Let's see. Okay, somebody with the last 4 digits of 6806. Go ahead and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, my name's Dan. I just want to thank you guys for the work you guys doing. Great stuff. I have a question for Eric. I sent him some pictures about a demonstration where an experimenter puts a conventional radio inside 2 tin boxes, and it only shows static, as you would expect. But when he puts that same radio in the near field of a TMT, the signal was able to penetrate the boxes. And I thought that was interesting because it showed it wasn't an electromagnetic wave. So the question is, what would Eric's advice be to replicate something like that? Is the extra coil necessary for that effect? And how we could apply Tesla's system to communications in general?
Did you catch that, Eric?
Yeah, I saw somebody sent me that in the mail, and I saw it. So it's definitely a working example of a longitudinal dielectric induction because it doesn't generate any magnetic field, so there's no way the metal can counteract it. So the lines of force simply terminate on one side of the metal and go outside the other. The exact parameters of the coil were not made clear, so the only thing you can do is just experiment with the regular primary, secondary type of arrangements. This, what I call the Crystalline Radio Initiative, gave all the design information on constructing the resonant coils with the primary and secondaries. So it pretty much can be handled from there. You just have to pick your frequency or, what size wire or how big you want to build the thing and then scale it from that. It's all algebraic. It should be pretty basic, but you do have to have at least some level of technical knowledge. It's not a beginner's thing. You have to know how to use algebra and build things and all that. But at any rate, I was satisfied with the experiment that it did demonstrate that a longitudinal dielectric transmission can penetrate a electromagnetic shield.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks for your question. Okay, let's see. Okay, somebody with the last 4 digits of 5403. Can you be unmuted? You can go ahead.
And I'm on Maui, Hawaii, otherwise known as NH70 on the air. I have a question for Eric when he was mentioning early on about the difference between a ohmic connection to the ground and a capacitive connection to the ground, how that affects the system that he's working with there. We in our normal antennas try to get, say, a vertical antenna on 160. You need a fairly extensive ground radio, which is capacitive. in his system, it sounds like he wants to make an ohmic contact. So how do those two things really differ?
Well, ultimately, I'd rather not make an ohmic contact, but that's the way that I can get the best aperture for conveying energy in and out of the transmission network. Well, the capacitive one has the advantage that there's no energy losses, and then it can become part of the reactance of the network. The disadvantage with the capacitance method is I have to run the impedance much, much higher on the transmission network so that I can get a capacitor current. I need a higher voltage, and that tends to reduce the bandwidth of the system and lower its operating frequency. So that's what we're experimenting with right now on the bench, is to try to see if we can come up with a reasonable network that'll have a frequency response from about 200 to 20 kilocycles, and that won't be disturbed by being connected to these capacitive probes in the ground, which are the big complication right here because this rock is so solid. I can't use plant roots like I did at Landers or like I can do at the other installation in the Mojave Desert where we have those creosote bushes available. So somehow I'm going to have to find the money and or the means to drill 30-foot boreholes into the ground and then put pieces of copper pipe down in there as capacitance electrodes. That's basically how I'm planning on doing it.
Okay, very interesting. In the use of a typical, vertical antenna array where you have several verticals in phase, for instance, end-fire phasing, would you say that the Alexanderson system is essentially phased ground rods in analogy to that?
Yeah, it's like a broadside array, but it's basically ground rods rather than air elements, and also it's monopolar, so that there's no plus or minus. So being that using the ground as the active terminal, it doesn't leave anything to ground to. So this network, just like the Tesla transformer, creates a self-referencing situation, kind of similar where, if you were hanging on a rope and you tried to push your car, normally the car wouldn't move and you would push yourself backwards, but in this case, your body wouldn't move and the car would move. In other words, the action-reaction process has been neutralized. That's what's novel about this. Conventional electromagnetic transmission system does not want to work like that, not easily anyway, even though in my research station at Landers, I did manage to voltage feed a halfway vertical element with a quadruple energy network consisting of 2 inductance energies and 2 capacitance energies, and was able to excite that in a monopolar fashion, eliminating any need for grounds or ground radials or what have you.
I see. Very interesting. Is the Alexanderson antenna at all directional?
It can be directional if you design the transmission network so it has some kind of finite velocity, whether it be slower or faster than light. But then that causes a phase shift along the network, and then there's a phase shift in the grounding elements, and that will cause a directional characteristic of the antenna as indicated in the Alexanderson patents. And it seemed to work for RCA, but it's very difficult for me to determine a lot of this stuff experimentally because of the sheer effort of such projects.
I see. Well, thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your question. Let's see. Okay, next person, the last 4 digits of your phone number is 8027. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Eric, my name is Ken.
Yeah.
I live in Northern California. And kind of a basic question for you, but when you're looking at the benefits and the design of a longitudinal transmission system, first off, I'm assuming that the primary difference is that instead of having the transmission line directly coming out of your transmitter and going into a coil, it goes into a primary, which then goes into a ground and secondary, which then actually ends up being the transmission element. But what are some of the other benefits of a transmission system of that type, other than just speed?
Well, the benefits are a lot less attenuation. to the point where you can actually convey energy by that means. So that was a challenge I put forth on this Crystal Radio Initiative in the Energetic Forum. The winner of the prize would be someone that lit a 100-watt light bulb off of AM radio stations somewhere, like 15 or 20 miles away. The only complication with that is that the grounding system would be about the same proportions of that of the transmitting station, which would be 120 wires about 500 feet long and a giant star radial, and that's beyond the capabilities of the average person. But somebody did actually manage to get it to work to the point where they ran a small motor off AM radio stations, power that was extracted from the coil by longitudinal transmission means.
Now, with that type of system, do you have to have exact matching in terms of frequency to be able to receive the signal? Yeah, both networks have to be fairly proportional to each other to some extent. They have to be on the same frequency. In the case of the AM radio station, obviously a good quantity of the energy of the AM radio station is lost electromagnetically in the space, so it's not the most efficient way to create a longitudinal transmission in the ground, but the fact that it is transmitting current into the ground as well as the antenna, because it's bipolar, and the fact that the antenna is a resonant structure and causes a large rise in displacement current and electromotive force, then AM radio station basically transmits half of its wave in the ground and half of its wave in the air. I just did an experiment with that in our more distant facility out in the Mojave Desert, where I have available to me 5 miles of underground phone cable that was basically what's called H-loaded, so that meant every 6,000 feet there's a splice pedestal, and it was filled with coils, which were not particularly needed for what I was doing, so I sectionalized the antenna. The coils we're using right now to build the Alexanderson networks here. And I tried the video, and it might be a little rough or whatever. None of our pictorial material on the last 3 months and $15,000 worth of effort has come out yet, but when it does, you will see that I took a small pocket AM radio, and I held it up, and I tuned around, and there was a fairly remote location. Maybe there was like 5 or 6 strong stations that came in. And then what I did is I took one section of telephone cable going one way, 6,000 feet, and the other section of telephone cable going the other way, 6,000 feet, and didn't bother to configure pairs or do anything fancy. I just took the shields of the cables and made a one-turn coil, and then put the AM radio, which has its loop stick magnetic coil on the inside of it, and aligned the turns. Then when I tuned through the AM band, every conceivable AM radio station that could be received in the western United States all came in loud and clear. So this is a direct indication that the underground mode is much more effective than the overground mode for AM radio reception. Amazing. And yet, just the fundamental principle of in-ground transmission means that you're obviously not using a transverse wave. You're using what I would consider to be, I'm assuming when you say longitudinal wave, that would be analogous to, let's say, a compression wave.
Yeah, it's kind of, not enough experiments have been done to really put definite terms on things. So what these waves are in the ground, I cannot keep a facility working long enough, or have not been able to, and other circumstances, like RCA going under and all this type of stuff. I just haven't been able to do all the experiments to come up with the exact details on these. But I view it basically as like earth currents. That's what gives rise to these telluric signals, is earth currents and their associated magnetic fields. So there's all these magnetic storms and turbulences in the Earth's magnetic field, and these are associated with currents that flow in the ground, and that's pretty much how Tesla viewed it as currents. But now whether these are conduction currents or displacement currents, that the ratio between those two is not quite figured out yet. But it's not strictly conduction current, because the ground in the Mojave Desert is all granite-based, and the ground here is all fused volcanic ash, and neither of those support conduction current. Yet in the Mojave, with the telephone cable, which was not buried in the ground so deep that there would be any conduction currents, it was only buried about 2 feet, then it's definitely a dielectric type of process involved.
Interesting. So one final question. I think it's actually I think that just to kind of throw it in, I think the work that you're doing is just really remarkable, and I want to thank you very much for pursuing it and being willing to go through all the trials and nonsense you have to go through your life to finally get to where you are and still being productive. So I really want to recognize you and honor you for that.
Well, the thing I always say is, no matter how hard you whip a coyote, it's still going to eat chickens and enjoy every minute of it.
and leave lots of feathers and bones.
Yeah. Well, you got to share a certain amount with the crows because they found the chicken for you, most likely.
That's right, man. It's all cooperative, one way or another. So I think that the work that you're doing with the seismic and telluric system is really amazing, and obviously I'm sure that there's a lot of offshoots of where this technology will develop. Are you seeing that eventually you could design a fairly easy to implement telluric monitoring system where if you had like a whole series of these things over a geographical territory, you could literally get a visual telluric energy map of that region?
Well, that's what I would like to do, but then we're up into about $1 billion price tag.
Yeah.
So there's no way, that any of this stuff can be done without some kind of very serious corporation. At one point, RCA, had started me on this. They didn't really know why. Neither them nor myself knew that it would turn out this way, but it kind of would have had to because the satellites were putting point-to-point and ship-to-shore out of business, and they turned to me to come up with a way around that, and I didn't know anything about Tesla. They didn't know anything about Tesla, but it turned out to be that was the route to go. But there is no more RCA, and there's no more, there was a situation here that if I could have got some kind of, some backing for the project, Bell Telephone would have supported it, or whatever Bell Telephone had turned into, or whatever's left of Bell Telephone, and that fell on some internationalists that were going to involve Siemens and all that, but they turned out to be money scammers, and story of my life, and the phone company ripped the whole thing down, and so now basically, I'm just doing basic, this stuff is my Social Security and donations I receive in the mail, and, a building that I can at least work on my car and write my notes, and that's very, very slow progress, particularly, when you get old and tired of it.
So just out of curiosity,
I don't know how to get a grant. The Navy, I wanted to go the Navy route, but that's been compromised by what I call the Gang of Four that hijacked my organization and caused the loss of our security clearance. So that's not happening. Universities are probably going to shy away from it because it's anti-Einstein. In fact, some of this stuff, even things that the power company normally utilizes in their daily operation for their systems, if you describe these phenomena to physicists, they become absolutely violent. In rejecting it, even though you can go right on the switchboard and read it off the instruments. Wow. So I don't know what to say. It's a hopeless situation, really. Unless
would you say
55-gallon drum of gold nuggets just crashes out of a spaceship and lands in the backyard, I don't know what to do. There's really nothing I can do other than crawl along.
Would you say that this type of resistance and just kind of attitudinal dismissal of the type of work you're doing is just only prevalent within the United States, or would you say that there's other areas that might be a little more acceptable?
It's even worse in Europe. In fact, if it wasn't for the United States, we'd still be burning kerosene for light.
South
They were
America?
so wrapped up in all their elegant mathematical theories and all their bull that there's no way that anybody could progress. So Heaviside turned on them, Steinmetz turned on them. Steinmetz moved here, Tesla moved here, Edison was already here. And the numerous people that they gathered around them to support this made it happen. But then the Einstein phenomena entered in the situation and just basically obliterated all their work and threw it back into where it was before, where it's just a sea of incomprehensible equations that have no connection to reality whatsoever. And trillions of dollars are spent on fooling around with that stuff and building giant apparatus that basically a lot of that stuff you could do with a simple, 5 or 10 kilowatt Tesla device, but they have to have their giant magnets and their giant lasers. And then basically American society is on the verge of collapse. In fact, it already has collapsed. There is no longer a civilization in this country. It's pure barbarity and aggression. And there's no, when you're dealing with, a subhuman species, the type that now populates America, they have no interest in anything except the next stimulation. And then when, they're done with the coffee, the cup just falls to the floor and the wind gets it. So it's hopeless.
Well, I think that, one of the things that being an observer and an advocate of this field for many years, I feel like that at the very least, just to be able to kind of codify and document and verify and validate the information really is key, because otherwise it gets lost and nobody has a clue. And
well, that's what we're attempting to do now with the facilities that have been made available to us, and this time the facilities have been made available to us by the government, the government agencies here, and they're very supportive, and they want to see this done, and they do not want anybody to screw it up. That's an improvement over before. But the warehouses of material, and the level of vitality that I had, and and all the support from different directions is all gone. So now I'm at a point in life where I am somewhat financially independent, as far as living as a coyote in my car in the bushes. I don't have to really worry about spending money except on, projects and all that, because I have no overhead. And I have, developed this high level of theoretical knowledge in a position now where, I should be able to enjoy the so-called golden years. Well, that's about the time that my body takes a crap.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
And there's nothing left to work with. I already built all this. I spent my whole life putting all this together to have this, in my elder years, and it's gone. And I don't, someone's going to have to cough up a big chunk of cash to make any of this happen within my projected lifespan. Already we're looking at 2 to 3 years being consumed just to set up these basic transmission systems that I've been talking about, the 50 poles we have here in the Great Basin and the 50 poles that we have in the Mojave Desert. And there's still, so many things that need to be done with the wires on those poles and all the grounding and the cabinets and the racks, and I don't know. So, we'll have something that we can demonstrate in a very cautious fashion, but it will be demonstrated, like, was done with the Landers thing, but it'll be demonstrated much more analytically, and that's all that I can see right now, and I'm hoping, that will bring some kind of research and development grant where then, we can try to move ahead at some kind of decent rate in this thing. But like I say, is this descent into savagery and aggression here in the United States has created the complete absence of a technological infrastructure that can do anything functional at all anymore.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments.
Okay, thanks for your questions. Okay, let's see.
Getting my lunch here.
you have a question?
Yes. I wondered if there's any way of developing a 10 kilowatt unit that could power a home.
No, this stuff is not intended for electrical generating. It's not a free energy system.
Okay. Well, I might be able to help and raise some money. I have some ideas. I'll get in contact with you and see about coming up. I have raised money in the past for various ventures. Thank you.
Okay.
See, somebody with the last four digits, 9037.
Hello, my name is Nick from Atlanta. I had a question about that book, Prodigal Genius by J.J. O'Neill. Tesla said that no matter can be attained from, no energy can be attained from the atom, but O'Neill said that Tesla's agreement was probably more of a psychological need for consistency. Do you think that was true, Eric?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer because there's so many interpretations of where the energy could come from, with atomic dissociation. So Tesla kind of was stuck in some of his reaction against things that he saw going on in science that were wrong. So he would kind of come up with some kind of overt statement that wasn't necessarily totally accurate. But the one thing of interest with Tesla's research and his statements is there is a very good possibility that radioactivity does not originate from within the matter, but it results from external causes, from bombardment of these Tesla rays, or cosmic rays as he referred to them. I do have trying to get some experiments out on the internet to get some basic equipment set up for trying to move ahead in this, but there's so many unknowns. I really don't know where to begin on that. But I wouldn't say that it's an absolute that you cannot get atomic energy out of matter, considering if somebody did. But then my theory is that the so-called atomic bomb does not derive its energy output from any atomic process, but somehow short-circuits the dielectric field of the Earth and derives its energy by that means. There were some experiments done by the Navy that I was told about by one of the people that did the experiments, who was a trustworthy engineer, Chris Carson, who appeared in a lot of our earlier videos. Unfortunately, he died. But there was no propagation delay in the impulse produced by the nuclear blast, which would indicate that something other than electromagnetism and energy is going on. So my theory, without any specific basis for it, is that ultimately Tesla is right, that the energy is being derived by some unknown external means. But I'm sticking my neck out on that.
Okay. In Steinmetz's electrical waves, discharges, and impulses, he says that in order to produce the magnetic field and the dielectric field, you need a power P, which is equal to the inductance voltage times the current for the magnetic field, and the capacity current times the voltage for the dielectric. But if the voltage and the current are just changes in the magnetic and dielectric field, then what produces those changes?
What's it? I missed the last sentence.
If the voltage and the current are changes in the dielectric and the magnetic field, how do you produce those changes to get the power?
By varying something. So anytime that there's a variation in magnetic induction, that creates an electromotive force, and anytime there's a variation in dielectric induction, that creates a displacement current. So it's a hand-in-hand thing. So if a current is initiated, that will cause the accumulation or the disintegration of the dielectric induction, and if an electromotive force is initiated, then that will cause the production or consumption of magnetic induction. And it should be pointed out that electrostatic potential and electromotive force, even though they're both called volts, are not the same. And conduction current and displacement current, even though they're both called amperes, are not the same. And I got into my last presentation, and going to be getting much deeper into that in the book that I'm writing. So you actually have 4 quantities involved rather than 2. There's 2 currents and 2 voltages, and all are active in any electric field situation.
All right. And my next question is, I know you said that the dielectric lines of force terminate into counter space, but in one of your lectures, you also said that they could be thought of as terminating on a proton at one end and an electron on the other end. How do they?
That's the standard J.J. Thomson view, and the line of force for the dielectric does not exist in space; it exists in counter space.
Okay.
Where with the magnetic, it's the other way around.
How do they propagate if they're anchored that way?
Longitudinally. So there tends to be no external broadside activity. It's all within the structure itself, within the line of force, where the magnetic is external to the line of force. There is only one system of lines of force, and that's the dielectric, and the magnetic is a result of those dielectric lines of force in some kind of motion or transverse variation. So to say magnetic lines of force is more of a mathematical term than a physical term as far as the J.J. Thomson concept goes, but Faraday originally conceived them as 2 separate lines of force, but when you, like I'm doing right now, try to figure out how these inductions cause the conductors to move about and things like that, the only way that can be explained is if there's a primary line of force, as J.J. Thomson indicates, and secondary lines of force being the magnetism and the primary ones being the dielectric, and so far that seems to be working out very well in my explanation of how electrical fields cause the wires and transmission lines to move about. So for example, if you have a short-circuited transmission line, there can be no electrostatic potential because it's short-circuited, and all that's left is the magnetism, and what that does is it pushes the 2 wires apart, because the spatial aspect of the ether wants to get out. If you open-circuit the transmission line, so there's no conduction current, but just electrostatic potential, that pulls the wires together because the counter space aspect of the ether is trying to contract, and then the mathematical relationship that I'm trying to hit upon that I cannot get any reference out of any physics books or anything that offers any meaningful or dimensionally consistent results is at what voltage and what current do the 2 forces cancel with no resultant force on the transmission line.
All right, and I was watching a National Geographic documentary on lightning, and the physicist's whole catchphrase for the thing seemed to be, "I don't know." So do you know what ball lightning is?
Well, ball lightning seems to be something where the electrostatic gradient becomes so intense that the air starts to break down, and then it draws more lines of force into it, and it becomes powered by the external field. It could be a radio frequency phenomenon. There was a person who did experiments with very intense magnetic inductance discharges, which produce some very disruptive longitudinal waves. I showed that in that early Borderland video. I think we called it the free energy video or something like that, where it actually disrupted the video camera. There was a kind of a huckster experimenter named Robert Golka that liked to make big electrical fires and things like that. He was mostly in the destructive stuff and not science, and he was getting these big motor field coils and railway engines and open-circuiting them without a discharge resistance, which tends to produce an infinite EMF, and then the capacitance in the coil will cause it to produce a severe oscillation, and he had ball lightning running around, and also it's known on Navy submarines, which of course are powered by similar electric motors and direct current systems, that during switching operations that ball lightning would jump out of the switchboard.
Okay. And
now, as far as lightning goes, the physicist concept of lightning, of course, is completely distorted like the physicist concept of anything electrical. They'd rather not even talk about it at all. Lightning is not something that's confined to the lightning strike. What happens is you might have 1 cubic mile of dielectric conduction sandwiched between the clouds and the Earth, and somewhere in that field is going to be something that disrupts it, like a piece of metal sticking in the air, or a certain type of mineral in the ground, or a radio tower, or something will concentrate that field, and because the dielectric field exists in counter space and not space, when saturation occurs, which is indicated by a streamer or some type of ionic breakdown of the atmosphere, in dielectric saturation, the saturated element does not exclude any more concentration, which is what you normally expect in a saturation condition, but in counter space, it works the other way around, so it will draw more lines of force in, and it will enhance the saturation process further until all of a sudden you reach a point where there's enough ionization, and that 1 cubic mile of dielectric induction will thunder transversely into the central column and expend all its energy there. That's similar to how my theory of the atomic bomb works. And that's basically how lightning operates. So the core of the lightning is not the dielectric event, is just kind of a shadow of it, or the part that you can see, but the rest of us, what's really going on in these massive surges of dielectric energy, is the main reason why lightning discharges cause extensive damage to relatively far away electrical and electronic devices because of these traveling waves that are produced. So lightning is not a linear phenomenon, it's a volumetric phenomenon, but because the physicists say there is no dielectric field, then all they can see is the lightning and everything else is Einstein.
So if it's a horizontal saturation, how come to our eyes it looks like it's going vertically?
Well, that's how the saturation occurs. So it's not necessarily something that's going to happen uniformly. It tends to make little jumps in 50 microsecond steps, and it's kind of an organizational thing. So that particular saturation fire does not, because it's not a conduction, it doesn't have to exist at the same time from one end to the other. It's like the ball lightning. It can start in little individual spots.
Okay. And I just had one more question.
Okay.
I know that by increasing the current, you reduce the inductance, right?
In a saturation condition.
So
otherwise, the current has no effect on the inductance, only if there's something in the inductive field that saturates, like iron or nickel or something where the atomic process can only handle so much magnetism, and then once it's saturated, it excludes the rest, so then the inductance no longer exists because there's nothing to hold the field, so you're just left with the residual inductance that would exist if there was nothing in the middle.
So if on the other side of the whole thing, if you increase the voltage in the dielectric equation, does that increase or reduce the capacitance?
That will increase the capacitance during the saturation interval.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, let's see. It's going on 3:25, so we've been on here almost an hour and a half. Are you still good to go, Eric and John?
Yeah, I'm fine.
You good? Okay. Let's see. Okay, next person that wants to ask a question, last four of your phone number is 7465. You should be unmuted. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Have you heard of the WITS quantum energy generator? The QEG, they call it?
No.
sounds like it's similar to your cosmic generator. They have it working. It creates like 10 kilowatts. 40 kilowatts, sorry. Kilovolts.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you Google it and if you YouTube it, it's everywhere now. I mean, it's actually, everywhere you go, you see it. People are building it. They say they have like 100 already built.
Well, you're saying this is some type of electrical generating device?
Based on resonance, based on Tesla's resonating steel with copper around the steel, and that creates an induction, which creates the voltage to the device, and then you can take the voltage and it feeds itself, and also it can feed your house.
Well, I don't know anything about that, so I would have to see some diagrams or something. So voltage is not energy, so there's a lot of other factors involved before it becomes energy. It sounds kind of like one of these same old things where it all sounds good and everyone's convinced, but it doesn't do anything. So I can't really comment on it unless I got one sitting in front of me and I got meters connected to it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's based on the Eklund patent, I believe. I'd recommend going to Energetic Forum, finding the thread on that QEG, and reading both of Peter Lindemann's comments on it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll do. And look forward to meet you guys at the conference.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, somebody else with the last four digits, 9289. Okay, you're unmuted. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear? Oh, you can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I work with alternative medicine, and I'm here. I know very little about what you guys are talking about, but I'm trying to figure out that why one of the things that I use, which is a pulsed electromagnetic field mat, is, it's helping to heal people, and some of that is kind of understood how that's working or really what the end effects are. But something that we learned about it, the new knowledge for everybody, is that when people, there are some workers, I don't know what the situation is, they have a daily mild exposure to radiation. They were testing positive for radiation exposure. They started using the mat before and after their work periods, and they no longer test positive for radiation. So, I already had these notions that electrons maybe are more like waves, right? And I can tell in the body in healing, I had stage 4 melanoma. I could feel waves going through my skin, and so I'm just really, I couldn't even tell you what a wave is. So this is not my field, but I was most curious about what's happening to that radiation in this pulsed electromagnetic field, and it's 0.4 Gauss is the strongest strength that it emits.
So now what you're saying is that radioactivity disappears, or some symptoms of radioactivity disappear?
Well, just being tested, during their testing, it's not there. And I don't know, because this is in Italy and I don't know these people, I don't know if they were even experiencing any symptoms. I don't know if they're digging uranium or, if they're working in a nuclear power plant. I don't know. I don't have any other data.
Yeah, it doesn't really help trying to figure out how anything works. There's not really enough information.
Well, but just that the insertion, but something else that, made me curious and made me, want to get to know your work in as much as I might understand it at some point, is that these mats that I use the Schumann resonances. One of them uses the main node, One of them may have the harmonics. Well, the harmonics are in there anyway because it's a sawtooth wave. So, somehow it's working with the energy that's here, and maybe that's unavoidable, the energy bubble that we're in. So I just thought I'd throw it out there and see if you had any notions. Well, but we find in any studies that they've done on hands-on healing, interestingly, whether it's Qigong or Reiki, it doesn't matter, or any kind of hands-on healing, they usually find the Schumann resonances. They thought they were emitting from the healer, but in fact, it's just a tuning between the healer and the healee. So, so there you are. I just thought I'd see if you had any notions about it.
Yeah, I don't. It's kind of not really enough information to do any figuring.
Okay.
So I don't think I can help you out too much on that. I mean, I could come up with a bunch of wild speculations, but, it's no point in that.
Yeah, on your eyes, though, I don't know what you've got going on there, but if you maybe could have those frequencies around you, it might help your eyes heal quicker, the Schumann resonances.
Yeah, I don't know. There's already plenty of that stuff floating around from all these power line harmonics and the rest of it. I think the best thing to do is to get away from all that, but I'm not certain. So, but I have my own methods. Living food diet is how I heal my body. But then I also have to consider my environmental conditions. I live outside when it might be, 10, 12 degrees. And it's freezing, freezing conditions, and that wind blowing in my face all the time is probably not doing anything good for my eyes.
Probably not, no.
No.
Well, okay, well, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, somebody with the last 47707, you're unmuted. You can go and ask your question.
Yeah, I thought I was in queue there, but I guess I wasn't. I've been waiting a while here. My name's Wayne, and I'm calling from Victoria, BC, Canada. And so I have a few questions here. I guess the thing that's might be a little bit off topic, but I was watching a YouTube video the other night about your Borderland video, where you had a light bulb and you were powering one with a 60 cycle current and the other was some sort of high frequency energy or voltage or something. And there was a foil strip that was being attracted to the bulb. And so I'm just really curious about that effect. And I was wondering what sort of circuit or power supply you had, or what configuration you had with that.
That equipment I do not have anymore. That was the power supply was a large medical Tesla coil made by Fisher. There's a guy named Mark McKay that duplicated this, and we showed it at one of the earlier conventions. So you basically have to have, in this case, a pair of transformers, and they have to be very carefully matched to the source of impulse discharges from this medical coil. And then once you get these transient oscillatory waves, then the Tesla rays start coming off of the filament of the bulb. And the bulb is actually operating more like the sun than it is an incandescent bulb. So then all of these related phenomena start to make their appearance around it, but trying to come up with any, quantitative description of these phenomena is a little far out there without doing a lot more experiments and thinking on the matter. And that equipment is no longer available to me, and it's not a line of my research right now. Not that I'm not interested in it, but I can't do everything, and just the sheer lack of materials, we'd like to put another modulator together, a radar modulator, to replace the Fisher medical unit to get cleaner waveforms and all that. And any of these transformers, whether they be for the cosmic induction generator or the crystal radio initiative or any of that, are all basically of the same dimensions. They can be run on any different type of power, transmit, receive, or even used radionically if you wish. But putting together that modulator is a big project, and there's just no way I can do any further research on that. The only thing I can suggest is go through all of Tesla's articles and his lectures on these various rays and his experiments, and he might be able to give you a little more insight on the matter.
Yeah, I've been reading through one of his lectures, and he's talking a lot about light bulbs emitting rays, and he talks a lot about rapidly varying currents and disruptive discharges. And I thought, I don't know if it's my concept of it is too simplistic. What you're describing to me, I'm not familiar with, although I have a fair bit of experience with. I built a Tesla coil out of microwave oven parts, and so I fooled around with this stuff, and I've been able to light neon bulbs at a distance without wires. And kind of what I was thinking is maybe if the frequency was higher or the potentials were higher, that I could light an incandescent bulb with just a basic primary capacitor, spark gap, and larger secondary coil. Not sure if I'm on the right track there, or if my apparatus is too simplistic. What do you think?
Yeah, the tuning and matching is what's really important. Whatever was in the Borderland video and whatever Mark McKay duplicated, I think that information can all be found. I'm not certain about it, but usually when I made those videos, I made every attempt to do such. Actually, this was originally done as a public demonstration for the U.S. Psychotronics Association convention they had in Colorado, but unfortunately, them, like the Tesla Society, they promptly suppress all of my material once my presentation is complete, and none of it's available to the public. You will not be able to find it anywhere. I was lucky enough to get some of my more recent lectures out, but that took quite a fight and a lot of threatening against me of being sued and all that kind of stuff, but we did manage to get them out. I believe, I don't know, right now we have this Islamic character is managing to get him pulled off of YouTube.
Oh, they're back
so
up.
I don't even know if they're there anymore.
Yeah, they're back up.
Okay. Most of this stuff is out of my control, and I live in my car. I don't have any internet or any of that. My
where are you located?
RC-47.
Where do you guys work from? Where?
Right now we're in central Nevada. I'm not too enthused about giving out the exact location, but we're in central Nevada right now. That's where the building exists. Otherwise, I live in about a 200 square mile equilateral, or 200 mile each side equilateral triangle with Death Valley in the middle, and that's pretty much my home, somewhere between the eastern Sierras and out into the Great Basin.
Okay. I was thinking you're up in the Idaho area now, given that you've been involved with... No,
Idaho is not really... Too many fences and gates, so I didn't really find that suitable. Oregon seemed to work a little better. I did manage to find a place where I could live in the wilderness in Oregon. Well, it's a little more difficult in the winter there because of the snow, and right now, because of my problem with my eyes, is I have to remain close to my social worker and the medical facilities in Lone Pine in case something takes a squat on me here. I don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere and then trying to get done on some emergency level, and it doesn't work out, so I'm confined right now.
Well, I hope that things change for you pretty quick.
Yeah, I hope so too.
So fast changing. I'm just trying to go back here to my question. Here was the high. Is it as simple as the high frequency alternations of like the long?
No, it has to be a transient.
A transient, yeah. So like a very fast blast of a
periodic transient. Sine waves will not do this type of stuff.
Right.
It has to be some kind of modulated envelope, or it has to be a series of transients. So there's two aspects to Tesla's work. One was strictly sine waves, and the other one was strictly impulses. later on, he denied his impulse work for whatever reasons, I don't know. But Tesla fooled around a lot. So, he would say things, and then he'd say something else, and so you can't always go by what Tesla said. But at any rate, those lectures that made him famous with his vacuum tube experiments and the articles he wrote relating to those things are pretty revealing.
Uh-huh. The light bulbs, like, are modern.
In his time, a lot of this stuff was not understood. Tesla was, ahead of his time. The things that we take for granted, like the Henry and Farad and stuff like that, hadn't even been conceived of yet. These ether theories and everything were still very vague. Tesla worked almost strictly experimentally and not analytically. And ultimately, we will never really fully understand the extent of his work, because this capitalistic mind virus that spread across all those people there in New York at that time, Steinmetz and all the rest of them, basically precluded any possibility of this ever being made scientific. It was all done for money making.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're
that's what was running the show. It was money making, not science.
Yeah, we have the same issue up here with our oil fields, and our government wants to create this huge natural gas pipeline and all this kind of stuff. So it's like more of the same of, are we ever going to get out of this, living in the dark ages? So.
Yeah, basically things fared the best for, people into this kind of research during monarchies.
Mm-hmm.
Monarchies are the best form of system for progress, and that's how, the Age of Enlightenment and all that came into being, because the monarchs supported it. But once this disease of capitalism and its counterpole, communism, were created, then there was no interest in that stuff anymore. It was strictly some type of gain or control.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've gone to the other side. There's no turning back. So it's a lost situation. We are back in the dark ages, and it's getting darker.
Mm. So just going. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you wanted to check with Mark McKay, he has some write-ups on that experiment that he replicated of Eric's, that diathermy machine. And his username in energetic forum is Spokane1. That's the digit 1. And if you private messaged him or started a thread on this machine, he'll probably just upload some papers he put together on that whole thing with all the specs and everything, so in case anybody wants to replicate what he did. We were going to put that up. I think he had some edits and stuff he had to do, but he might have those done by now. And he's always, open to sharing his work. And I think on EnergyScienceForum.com, there's pictures from either 2013. The 2013 conference is when he had that, and Eric helped tune it up and get it to get it working. And I think he also brought it in last year's conference, so you can see some pictures of it. But I'd encourage you to private message him or post a thread at Energetic Forum to Spokane1, and he'll probably post the papers on all that.
Sounds good. Can I just one other point here I wanted to kind of address, and it's related to Thomas Townsend Brown and some of my experiments and what he wrote about and what he did with regards to high voltage, sudden changes, cross capacitors with high dielectric constants and large masses. And it seems that when these capacitors are suddenly charged, like during that time, there's a thrust observed. And I sort of see this similar thing with your experiment with the light bulb and the force that's produced. And so I'm just wondering if you're familiar with Thomas Townsend Brown's work and electrogravitics, and
not too much. I mean, I've seen it. I went through it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, there wasn't anything there that really got me excited because it was all like very small quantities and it was all direct current orientated.
Mm-hmm. The key idea, I think, is the impulse, right?
I'm not that well versed on the details of it.
Yeah.
So I can't really comment on the relationship between that and Tesla's description of how these vacuum tubes operate. So pretty much I worked from the theoretical standpoint of J.J. Thomson and the experimental standpoints of Nikola Tesla, and that's what I base my conceptions of things on, which of course are not very popular in the world of physics.
Right. Okay, one other little thing I think it might be. Versor versus phasor. I did some college courses in circuit analysis, and we learned about phasor diagrams and vectors, and I'm not sure your terminology of versor, is that the same thing as phasor diagrams, or are we talking about?
Well, no, the phasor is something that's dynamic, but the versor is strictly a position. It's like, the divisions on the clock. So the first real popularization of that concept was the use of the imaginary operator by Steinmetz, but he misinterpreted it as a vector. But actually it's a versor operation, and then because versors were related to quaternions, which were despised by Heaviside, and were really a useless mess because people really did not know how to extend the concept of complex numbers, the versor thing just basically vanished. So the problem is when you start getting into polyphase power systems, you have to return to the versor concept. So I wrote quite a bit of material on that, but it's extremely difficult to get published because of the complexity and
so I wouldn't find versor stuff in textbooks in electrical engineering. Is that what I'm?
Yeah. Well, basically any electrical engineering textbooks for the most part are going to be useless to get into any really in-depth understanding of anything. Unless you go back to the day of like Steinmetz, and he of course is highly mathematical. The champion of versor mathematics is a guy named Dr. Alexander McFarland, that operated out of the University of Austin, Texas, and also in Edinburgh in the United Kingdom. And it was his mathematical papers that got me started on this whole process, along with Steinmetz's application to alternating current theory, where basically all the equations are versor equations, are not really vectorial anymore, but you're using what are called versor operators. So I should have a book coming out on the theory of that before long, hopefully, even though there seems to be some kind of complication. I just can't seem to get it untangled or whatever, which basically has made me give up on it. But I did write something, and maybe one of these days it'll get out somehow. But it's from a mathematical, theoretical standpoint. Its practical application in engineering is what's called the method of symmetrical components. But again, they try to turn it into a phasor and vector situation, and that just completely erases the whole idea of the versor and creates all these complexities that makes what few books on the subject exist almost incomprehensible. And they offer no theoretical basis for what they're doing, so that's why I came up with my material. So the other thing with versors is the versors connect also to musical scales. So the concept is expandable, and it's probably expandable, I don't know how far, but this is what's going to be in my next presentation on electricity and music. It actually can carry all the way to the theory of numbers and numerology itself.
Oh.
But I have, I'm inventing all this stuff basically on my own, and I can't, all these mathematicians and stuff, that write to me and whatever, nobody can even help me with the most basic elements of this stuff. I'm just strictly on my own.
So the versors, they relate the scalar quantities, like the dielectric fields. Is that kind of correct, or?
Right. The versor is normally used in the time cycle. So a versor is a matter of position. It's where you're at in the cycle. It's a versor position, like the hour marks on the clock. Those are versors. The hand length is always the same. That doesn't vary. There's no vector involved there. It's strictly a versor. It's a position. You can remove the hand and just put a light bulb, behind the number. There is no length involved. A versor is strictly a matter of position.
Okay.
So if you're changing positions in an alternating current system from one phase to another, then that's a versor operation. To go from phase A to B in a three-phase system is a versor operation, which is a 120-degree shift.
Okay.
So if you have phase A as unit value of 10 volts and you have phase B that's 8 volts, well, then phase B has to be preceded by a versor operator, which indicates that voltage has moved in its cyclic position to another spot, which is identified by that versor operator. So normally the letter J is used for that in the 90-degree configuration, which is called an imaginary operator, and then all of this mathematical, justification is given for it, which is not really correct and leads to a bunch of confusion.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Eric, could I cut in with a question?
Yeah.
My name's Chris. I'm in Wisconsin. And along these lines with the math you're talking about, I'm wondering what you think about Rodin's vortex math.
I don't know anything about that.
I wonder if it doesn't hold quite a bit of information for you, because here's where it comes from. It comes from Tesla's quote where he says, if you can understand the 3, 6, and the 9, you have powers into his imagination.
Well, that goes back to the numerological thing. That's no longer a strictly physical process anymore.
Well, correct, but what I'm looking at is I'm seeing now they've got creations called Rodin's coils. People are looking at Rodin's coils, windings of wires, and they're finding strange phenomena in certain geometric windings, which are representative of Tesla's 369 and the vortex math that Rodin does. And so the vortex math...
I think that's going to be a little beyond me right now. I can't take on another study. I'm already saturated.
I think it's going to... I think, though, that there's a connection there, because this math is describing waves in motion in 3 dimensions, and how all of the math, whether it's addition, subtraction, whether it's division or multiplication or even exponential or fractional, it all comes back to the singularity of 9, and it goes through 0 to 9. And it helps simplify the math in wave form.
Yeah, well, it sounds interesting.
I'd encourage you to.
Well, I can't. Like I say, I can't take on any more material. I'm saturated. People send me piles and piles of stuff to read. I got a book I'm trying to finish. I have a presentation I'm trying to put together. I got my car to work on. I can't take on any more material.
Sure. I just wondered if it might help you in your, obstacles, that if you see some of this representation math, you might simplify some problems you're having.
Yeah, possibly, but right now my main problem is trying to figure out how to make this connection between ether and induction and motion of conductors, and that's got my head filled to where it can't handle anymore. And then at the same time, I have to figure out how to put this Power of Music presentation together with...
that sounds fascinating.
Well, that will be that ties into the number thing you're talking about.
Have you heard of a gentleman named Dan Winters?
Maybe by the time that I make that presentation, I might have come up with something with regard to that.
Have you heard of a gentleman named Dan Winters? He does some work in that area in terms of resonance and waves and music, and how the waves are fractions or repeating symmetrical octaves. Dan Winters has done some great work with that.
Okay.
He's done.
Well, I mean, because people are always free to send me copies of this stuff in the mail, and
okay.
I usually go through it, in the course of the day, and answering everybody's letters and what have you. That's if you have anything that you think is interesting, send it to my general delivery address in Lone Pine.
Okay, well, thanks, Eric, and I made a donation to your PayPal account, and I appreciate your efforts, and I wish you the best of good health.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We have, somebody with the last four of the phone number, 4953. You're unmuted if you want to ask a question. And if we can kind of be brief with the questions, we're getting on 2 hours here. So we want to...
Yes. Hi, thank you. My name is Aaron, and I just I kind of was turned on to your work, Eric, less than a year ago, and I find it extremely fascinating. I think you're very unappreciated, and unfortunately, I just want to express my gratitude for the work that you've been doing and getting out there and sharing despite all of the challenges you've been facing. And once I'm able to donate financially to your cause, I definitely will. Until then, any of my current skill set that might benefit your work, I'm open to anything you might need. Although much of what I do has nothing to do with electrical engineering or anything like that. I'm more of a media person. But my question in general, I was curious, much like the last person who was just talking about the Rodin coil. There's another gentleman out there whose work I believe parallels yours. Although, and I know that you're not a big fan of physics or physicists in particular, but this gentleman, he's a theoretical physicist, but he has the same opinion that you do about the whole study in general, about how it's just very dogmatic. His name is Nassim Haramein. I'm just curious if you're familiar with his work.
No, I'm not.
Okay. I might send you some stuff that I find that I think, he talks a lot specifically about his theories of the sun and the activity of the sun and it being electrical and hollow, also the Earth expanding.
Yeah, well, that's something I'm definitely interested in because that's my belief also.
And he wrote, he has a paper, I believe it's under peer review right now. That's his version of the unified field theory. And he just has an amazing way of, everything is mathematically perfect. He pretty much solves everything that we observe in the universe. And it's very interesting the way it kind of comes full circle to really kind of, it backs up a lot of the spiritual teachings of thousands of years. It has a lot to do with fractal geometry. I mean, it's all basically based in fractal geometry, and he speaks a lot of harmonics, octaves, and things like this. And I just saw him speak recently, just a couple weeks ago at the Conscious Life Expo, and I had asked him if he was familiar with your work, and he said no. So I can't help but feel that the two of you guys, if you guys were somehow to come together, it would be like exponential. Like your work just seems to support each other to an amazing degree, and I know that there's something there. I can't explain it, but I know that there's something there.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting. Maybe, at any rate, you can send them some of my material and send me some of his material, and we'll see what happens.
I will. I'll do that. I'd love to be able to facilitate that if I can. And
okay.
I wish you the best of health, and I hope you heal up soon. And I'll continue to follow your work, and thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, we're hitting on 2 hours here.
Yeah, I'm beginning to lose steam, so maybe a couple more questions, and then I think that'll be it for today.
Okay, let's see. Okay, somebody with the last four digits, 3968. Maybe we can hang on for another 15 minutes, and we'll wrap it up. You should be unmuted. You can ask your question. Last four digits, 3968.
Hello, this is Tim from Florida. Just appreciate Eric's sharing with us his immense study and all the study he's done. Those of us who drink every drop that falls from him, we really appreciate it. I only have a simple question. Maybe it's very complicated, but I'm trying to understand what is a magnetic field. If you took the volume that we call a magnetic field, what is inside that volume that you understand, or what are your thoughts about that?
Okay, it's basically a phenomenon of the ether. Yeah, it's a phenomenon of the ether that's polarized and in motion. And to take it any farther than that, then just involves speculation.
So you understand the magnetic field not to be static like a capacitive field, but to be dynamic and be in motion?
Well, both the dielectric and the magnetic field have a dynamic aspect within the ether. So with the dielectric aspect, the motions are confined into an internal structure, but with the magnetic aspect, they're externalized.
So if we have a conductor with a constant, steady DC current going through it, there's a magnetic field around that conductor. Would you say that magnetic field is static, or is it circulating around the conductor?
The magnetic field as a whole is static, but the ether is in the process of a circulation. And that's what's producing the force on the conductor.
Okay, interesting. So has there been any experiments that you know of?
Well, it's not really something you can get your fingers into. That's the problem. It's the ether. It has no physical existence, even though it's a substance. What I can do is refer you to a book written by J.J. Thomson called Electricity and Matter, where these basic theories are laid out in very elementary form, not involving much mathematics at all. They're very descriptive.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, this thing, let's see. Okay, last four digits, 6163. You're unmuted.
Hi, Aaron. This is Jeff in Idaho. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
This is Jeff in Idaho. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I emailed you the stuff about William Line last year and spent the evening with him with his health conditions, showing him how to increase his pH with his health issues, and talking to John Bendini about his throat. For Eric, I think that might be a good thing also. If you look at Jeffrey Tennant, he's studied how the body heals itself. It's called voltage is healing, and he's got an addition for the eye. What you have to do is you have to bring the differential voltage between the inner and outer cells above negative 0.25 volts. And the easiest way I found to do that is to increase the blood pH. And I've increased my mom's pH after she needed a double knee amputation to basically get the wounds off at home, and with ozone and colloidal silver. And if you flow about 4 ounces a day of colloidal silver, the log of 10 of the pH of the colloidal silver will bring the arterial, if you do an arterial blood glass measurement, up to about 0.5% over the optimum healing rate of 7.45. You got to get the blood pH up to that where the body will heal. And Eric, even though you're on your natural food diet, I think this would go in a good direction. If Aaron could download like a Kindle version of Jerry Tennant's work, and he's got an eye version of Voltage is Healing, I think that would help you with getting your eyes back, because we don't want to lose you from the standpoint of all those things. I have a person I've sent Ken Wheeler's work to that's a super scientist, and he's very metaphysical and leans in the direction of all the things we've talked about. And I'll try and put forward the $850,000 proposal for your stuff, and if he could maybe get you a visit, I'll try and I bought the Lander stuff, and I'll make mention where it is on the internet. But I had a question on when you look at Ken Wheeler's work and you look at your wireless power theory, figure 5 a long time ago, that's the simplified diagram of the Tesla magnifying transformer.
Right.
Okay. So between the two coils, you essentially have, I think, the dielectric plane that is well documented in Ken's book. In the central flat plane. Do you understand what I'm saying? You've got the he never sent me the book, so I never. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Familiar. Yeah. Okay. Well, imagine two cones that are like let's say 30 degrees coming into each other, and at the point they meet where they get the smallest, that's essentially the extinction ratio with this Dan Winters guy is doing. It's essentially you essentially the golden mean fold inward and fractally until you get so small that you reach critical self-focusing, and you get these real nonlinear effects of these oscillation things that we talk about with transients with Tesla, and you get essentially you remember on your analog of music, harmony 1, rhythm 2, melody 3. Those dimensions are in the dielectric plane in the very center where it flattens out and it starts to spiral. That's the center of the two coils in your simplified diagram of the Tesla coil.
Okay.
All right. So what you're doing is in this pH system that I was trying to get to is when you take the pH on the blood up, you're storing more energy in counter space. So what happens is the you know how you had in one paragraph of that the wireless power you mentioned Wilhelm Reich and how you know, those elements mix. Well, this is one thing I'm combining a lot of different things and your seminal work and these other things where that your simplified diagram is actually essentially the foundation of life there. And essentially Ken Wheeler's work, if you take your figure 5 from your the thing that you've written on, that's essentially the Ken Wheeler work. And so I just want to kind of convey that to you if possible. I'll try and get some information on that. But Aaron, if you could download and read Voltage is Healing, the iVersion from Jerry Tennant off of Amazon, you know, the easiest way I've found is to increase the pH safely. And you know, like in cancer patients, they take a lot like a cesium carbonate, you know, something that's super alkyl to raise the pH. But this is the safest way, and essentially the Ken Wheeler where the two cones point at each other. If you think of those counter rotating at each other, okay, and at the point where the dielectric plane is, that's essentially where it's storing that energy electrostatically. That's essentially, I think, what's going on organically with almost all life and stuff. And so for Eric's eye, the simplest thing is to nebulize 4 ounces of colloidal silver through like a 1 pint, like a glass bottle. It's got like a silicon seal, and that'll increase the pH. There's a lot of people that do things like that. But Eric, if you've had an arterial gas blood measurement, you know you got to be above 7.45 in pH to have your body heal itself. Because what that means is there's a negative 0.25 to negative 0.3 volts of differential voltage between the inner and extracellular fluids.
Well, I know about the alkali pH, and that's pretty much how I heal my body all along, because I do not have the conventional all-American battery acid diet. Right.
Well, what I'm saying is the simplest thing for you that I've done with my mom, they were going to basically do below-knee amputations for my mom. I came home with like 25 square inches of wound area that was, basically dead tissue, and I soaked it off using, I used charge exchange from ozone, pumping colloidal silver to basically make a perfectly biological liquid, and it would slowly basically soak the wound off, and it would heal the edges, and the wound would slowly come off. And so by using that process, I found that when the ozone would break down, it would release, 1 particle for delta sigma oxygen at like in the red, and then 1 in the near infrared. Well, those energies, when they optically pump the body, okay, they go in and they make single oxygen in the body, and you need as much single oxygen in your body. And this book by Ed McCabe, Flood Your Body with Oxygen, or an alkaline diet, and all these other things, I found that if you basically break down ozone and you waveguide it, if you take like Fe2O3, like a hematite little balls, and then you ozonate it, and you basically break the ozone down into delta sigma oxygen that is really super healing. So if you reflect that down a silicon waveguide, you get photodynamic therapy on your body. Okay, and this is what one of the ladies was talking about earlier. When they use that pulsed electromagnetic field, what's going on is they're killing the parasites in the body, and the parasites are what store the radiation to make them live. They're living off the radiation fields inside your body to survive as a host.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's what Dr. Harold Clark in that Cure and Prevention of All Cancer book that I had at last year's seminar that I was kind of showing around to a couple of people, like when I was talking with Jim and Paul the Sunday night. So I'll email Aaron a couple things, but Aaron, if you could read that for him. But the simplest thing, and I showed this to John Bendini. I showed the bottle and the pictures of my mom's blood work. Just give him a call and mention, that Jeff that wanted to, help him with his health was, trying to convey the same thing to Eric, because he remembers seeing the pictures of my mom's blood work. But I can email him if you're interested. But that's the simplest way to get you super healthy that doesn't have any other impacts, and it kills the parasites. And these two colloidal silver particles, what they do is, I think they're in a monoatomic state and rotating against each other, and they're charging the dielectric field in between them. And so that's what raises your pH, because you're internally electrostatically charging your body electrostatically. Does that make sense, Eric?
Well, yeah, it's a lot of theory and speculation. So all I know is when I go to the VA for a checkup, is their instruments all read funny, and they don't recognize me as a human. And one of the main complications seem to be is my extremely high oxygen content.
Right. This is the system I'm telling you what this does. I have my mom at 99% oxygen, and if you measure her blood saturation, it's 164 instead of being like 60 to 85. It's like 166. It's as high as you can get. But I have a different method of doing that, though. I do it with a living food diet, and then I live outside. And I get the same results. One thing I did to really freak out some medical people once is for 2 years there in the antenna field of Bolinas, I had no shoes. I wore no shoes for 2 years. Right, you're grounding, right. And, nothing really affected me, the cold or wet or any of that, because I'm on a living food diet and I live outside. A process that usually, unfortunately, happens when I'm running through the field is I tear my feet open on blackberry bushes. So what I did is I was going to the nurse's office there because it appeared I had some complication from something I got into in some surplus place or whatever. So I was having this sore on my arm tested, and to show them that I didn't have an infection process is what I did is with the wound on my foot, as I went over to a cow patty with my bare foot and rubbed the open wound into the cow shit, and then went to the doctor's office and asked him why I don't get an infection. Right. Well, that has to do with like how high your pH is, because what happens is the polymorphism of how many organisms are in your body. When the pH gets high and these electrostatic fields are what they are and they're rotating, essentially they basically produce enough voltage in the smaller DNA to short them out, and essentially that's what kills their life function, like what you're talking with the Wilhelm Reich with the biome stuff. Right. So, okay, that's all I wanted to convey, but I'll try and pitch your proposal for the 850K to this one scientist, and I'll try and get him to get down to your area if he can kind of do that for you. Well, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Hey, good luck today, okay? See you, bye. Okay, bye.
Okay, go ahead. Have you heard about the vortex theory by Dr. Russell Moon, the final theory of everything?
Who?
The vortex theory. Dr. Russell Moon. No. I'm his #1 student, and I'm going to go to the conference. I'll be able to meet you, but basically the things that you're looking for is explained by his theory. Ether and everything. You should take a look at it. Yeah. The vortextheory.com. And when I visit you, I can bring some books. Okay. And my name is Fabian, by the way. Yeah, or you can just send me some brief material on it to my mailing address. I'd rather do it in person. Don't get too carried away, because I only got so much room in my car, and anything that gets sent to me ultimately gets jettisoned because it competes for living space. I hear you. I understand. Now, while I'll wait for the conference, I'll just hand over a couple books that he's written on the internet. Yeah. Sounds good. And basically explains everything. As a matter of fact, we've changed the speed of light. We've transferred energy to higher dimensional space and back again. We've also, I'll tell you in person when I see you. Okay. If you just Google his name, you'll see all the 34 publications worldwide. Yeah, I don't have access to any of that, so. And also, he's also the second person besides Einstein to give an exact mathematical explanation for the Michelson-Morley experiment.
Okay.
Which proves that it proves why time does not exist. Time is a function of motion.
Yeah, I might disagree with that, but at any rate, my interest is more in practical stuff, so I don't like getting too far out there in theory.
Yeah, well, there's no theory. There's actually there's 3 proofs, but I got to show them to you in person.
Okay.
I spoke 2 of them. Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. But just to when I see make sure I bring a couple copies.
Okay.
That's all. All right, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, everybody, thanks for being on the call. Again, make sure to check out John and Eric's websites, johnpolakowskiscience.com, ericpdollard.com. Again, if you're interested in some of the books and videos based on their talks or any of the books that they have out, purchasing those through their own websites is the best way to support them. You can also make PayPal donations, and there's addresses where you can send check or money orders if you want to help donate to their work. And also, middle of July, I would register early. We still have 4.5 months till the conference, and already 50% of the chairs are already booked. And so even if you're not able to send in payment right away, go to EnergyScienceForum.com and at least fill out the registration form, even if you think that you might want to come, and then you can figure out the details later, because there's still time to send in payment and everything. And so also on EnergeticForum.com, that's where Eric's forum is, where John posts a lot of his work. And there's a lot of papers by Eric in there, and there are other people doing different replications of some of Eric's work, sharing pictures, diagrams, schematics with all the details and what parts they're using and everything. So it's not just theory. I mean, people are making things that actually work and do what Eric says that they do. And so other than that, you or John, do you have any final comments?
No, I think I'm pretty worn out, and I probably need to go help John with what he's doing. So,
okay.
So,
all right.
I think that wraps it up.
Okay. Well, appreciate your time, Eric, and I'll be in touch. And again, everybody, I'll get this up on YouTube in the next couple days in case you want to listen to any of it again. And thanks for being on the call. And thank you and John for your time.
Okay. Well, you're welcome. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
And talk about synthesizing energy. Is that what some people would basically say is, so-called free energy, or more energy is appearing than what you can account for that you're putting into it?
Yeah, basically. It certainly takes energy putting into the magnetic amplifier to see some energy gained, and we haven't quantified yet how much is out versus in, but we have seen some energy created in a strange fashion.
Yeah, and you've been working on this for a couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah, I sat down. I was working on the mag amp a couple of years ago, and then I kind of put it to the side to work on the cosmic induction generator. But now I'm kind of revisiting it for this talk.
And is any of your work on that, was some of it posted in energetic form?
I did not post it. I was planning on writing a book about it, but I should have some. I'm certainly going to be posting the results from our experiments here on the forum.
Right. Yes, if you're listening on energeticforum.com, there's a forum inside of the Renewable Energy Forum, which is Eric Dollard's forum, and inside there's an Eric Dollard thread, and there's actually 3. 2 old ones are closed down just to kind of preserve the information so nothing happens to it, and then there's a more recent one that's been going on for a while, and it has a lot of diagrams, and people are posting replications that they've built based on some of Eric's designs. And I think recently, I don't know if it was maybe David Dawson or somebody, might have posted some papers on the magnetic amplifier. Do you know where he got? Did he get those from you or?
Oh yeah. He got them from me a long time ago. Eric came up with magnetics for me on the output circuit of the magnetic amplifier, and I just never got around to posting them. But that is one of the circuits that I experimented with.
Right. So are you going to be? Besides giving a talk at the conference on this magnetic amplifier based on Eric's designs, are you going to be able to have a demo there, kind of like you did last year?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Are they pushing of that too?
Yeah. No promises on energy synthesis or more out than in, but we should be able to show some cool stuff.
And is that going to be something that's going to need a lot of power, like the cosmic induction generator, or is that something you can just plug into the wall?
No, it's
pretty low power. Okay. Okay, today is February 28th, 2015. It's 2 p.m. Pacific time. This is Aaron Murakami, and on the line I have Eric Dollard and John Polakowski. I am recording this call, and so if you know anybody who wanted to be on but couldn't, this will be posted on YouTube here shortly. And so if you're just logging on, go ahead and hit $4 and that will mute your own phone. And then what we're going to do is just go over a couple updates, and then we'll open up for live questions. And if you have any questions for Eric or John when we do open up for questions, just hit $5 and that will give me a little flag on my screen so that I know that you want to ask a question, and I'll unmute you, and I'll just read off like the last 4 digits of your phone number so you know you're the one being unmuted for the to ask your questions. So right now, John Polakowski is actually down at the lab with Eric, and they've been working on some experiments. And John, do you want to kind of explain kind of the purpose of your trip and what you've been working on since you've been down there for the last week?
Yeah. So what I've been doing is I built this analog transmission network that Eric designed that is supposed to validate his model of creating a Tesla coil in a lumped element instead of distributed network, and that's what we've built. And it took 3-4 days to actually build it, but we started doing tests on it today. So it's looking good so far.
Now, is that similar to like what Eric demonstrated in some of the old Borderlands videos, where there's a bunch of, I think maybe like resistors and capacitors in this little network, and it kind of went cold to hot or hot to cold or something? It was kind of like counterintuitive to what most people would think was going on?
I think you'd have to ask Eric about that because I'm not too sure.
Yeah, it's the same, pretty much the same thing. So what we're doing right now is we're attempting with the limited materials on hand that aren't the right value to get a close enough impedance match for the loading networks that are going to go up on the telluric antenna. So we're starting with its component waves, and then determine what their frequencies and impedances are going to be, and then composite them into the final network, which I don't think there'll be enough time this time around for John to do that. Plus, I have to run off. I have this complication with my eyes that's kind of putting me out of business. So anyway, we're trying to get done what we can here inside the...
yeah, it doesn't take very long.
Right. And so, are there any updates or anything else that you want to tell everybody about, or?
Well, yeah, I'm going to be putting a bunch of updates on my website, particularly when I get back from my week here. And I guess that's about it.
Okay. Hey, Eric, is there anything that you want to add about the magnetic amplifier stuff that John's working on and that what he wants to share at the conference?
Yeah, well, that's something we worked on years ago, and then I got rather disgruntled because none of the material appeared on the energetic form, and then basically lost interest in all of it and got into other things. So at any rate, it was the outgrowth of a mathematical paper that I wrote at the same time on the production of electromotive force and the law of electromagnetic induction. And there's a third type of electromotive force production that's not considered, and it's by what's called parameter variation. And presently, I'm really twisting my brain trying to come up with the next chapter on my book on my last presentation. These things take quite a bit of time to get together, and this is going to be a big one. And found a paper by Steinmetz that basically says that there is no definite relation between the energies in these type of systems. It's all based on the assumption of the conservation of energy, but mathematically it's never been proven that there is the law of conservation of energy applied to parametric variation type of electromotive force generation. So the whole idea is to come up with a system that does it with a static means without rotating equipment, and that's what the magnetic amplifier does. So a parametric EMF was generated, but in order to calculate the powers and energies going in and out, it takes a lot more meters and things that we have. And the complication that I'm facing is there seems to be this notion running around that I have a laboratory. I do not have a laboratory. I have an icebox filled with junk. And if we're lucky, we can find the right pieces to put something together, but at any rate, I have to, out of my Social Security, feed people and pay for their gas here and pay for their gas back and pay their rent when they're gone from where they live, and it's just simply too difficult for me to handle that. The donations that come in to EPD Laboratories is pretty much consumed in rent and insurance, and there's no way to actually make any progress on the building whatsoever with that amount of funding. And then the donations that I personally receive in the mail all go into the aforementioned expenses.
I foresee it being, possible to happen. There's always, all kinds of unpredictable things that can happen, but for the time being, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't happen.
But even 500 watts is quite a bit more than what it was. What was the original power level you were working at?
Well, I think at the conference this past summer, it was at 100 watts, but we ended up having a burn down and a couple equipment problems. Part of it due to that impedance mismatch, we burned up the coax that was leading into the primary network. So, so this would be quite a bit more.
Right. So for this, at the conference this year, that'd be awesome to be able to bring that up and do a demo at the 500 watt level. But what is the title of your talk going to be this year at the conference?
Well, it's going to be about the mag-amp and synthesizing energy via Eric's theory of parameter variation. And so the embodiment of it will be varying inductance, but the talk will cover the theory of parameter variation in general. Mm-hmm. So it'll be about synthesizing energy via changing the inductance.
Now is that, and when you talk about energy synthesis, I know this is a term Eric has used for a long time, synthesizing energy and desynthesizing energy, and it looks like there was something like that going on with the cosmic induction generator when you and Eric were doing measurements showing that you had a certain output from the radio transmitter, and then it seemed to be just disappearing right in the middle of nowhere, right between the coils.
It seems that way, that some of the RF was just not accountable for. We didn't. We certainly didn't have detailed measuring equipment available, but it seemed that there was something anomalous going on.
Right, and those charts and graphs of those tests you have, I think it's posted on Eric's Facebook page, but it's also on your blog site, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested in some of that work John's been doing with the cosmic induction generator and some of the tests that he did with Eric, showing that it looks like energy is literally just disappearing right in between the coils and can't account for it, those graphs are on John's website as well. And John's website address is johnpolakowskiscience.com. And so on the mag amp, when you're talking about a magnetic amplifier designed by Eric.
The walk-in refrigerator. It's about 48 in here right now.
Right. So that analog network you're building is directly related to the seismic project. Is it like a small-scale model, and when with the actual telephone lines up, you're basically going to do the same thing but on a large scale? Is that kind of the idea?
Well, the thing is the network counteracts the telephone line, so even by itself on the bench, it'll do the same thing as it will when it's distributed out on the poles. So this is like the final network. We have to come up with some kind of final design, and then by the end of the year, hopefully we'll have all those networks attached. We're still missing an awful lot of stuff. So anyway, we're going to see the coils I have. Basically, it's the same thing as landers, but I do not have the same coils. I got coils that I got from somewhere else, so it's going to throw the impedance off. The problem here, unlike landers, is I cannot get a conductive ground, so it's going to be all these complications and boring holes into the earth and picking up capacitively, and that's going to require higher impedance. So this is not something that I can just go to the radio engineering manual and get the answers for it. So that's why there's a lot of experimenting going on right now.
And John, you're there for maybe just a couple more days. You might be taking off.
Yeah, I'm gonna be here till Monday. So I'm gonna be leaving on Monday.
Now, what's the like? What kind of progress have you been? I know a lot of people are wondering about the cosmic induction generator project, and since the conference last year when you demonstrated it at the low power level, where you were able to get some of the electrical flames off the rings.
Yeah.
What have you been doing with that project in the last 8 months or so?
Yeah. So at the last conference, one of the things we discovered is that there's a huge impedance mismatch between the transmitter and the parallel resonant circuit of the primary, and so after that, what needs to be done is a impedance matching network needed to be created to make sure more of the power got into the coils. And so basically, I spent the past few months designing that network and then kind of refining it, and now I'm ready to build it.
Okay. Now the 2015 Energy Conference is coming up in the middle of July. Do you know if you're going to be presenting on something different, than the cosmic induction generator this year, but do you know if you might be bringing up the cosmic induction generator to do a demo at the higher power?
Well, I'm certainly going to try to. I don't think we would have it at the 1 kilowatt level, but maybe the 500 watt level.